My name is Andrew Crummy, and I've come with my daughter from Scotland to be here, and it's wonderful to be here. And so what I'm going to do is take you through a little journey. It will make sense by the time we get to the cancer tapestry at the end. If you go back to 1959, I had just been born, and I was getting pushed around in the pram, and my big brother wanted to learn to play the violin. Now, we lived in a poor community on the edge of Edinburgh called Craigmillar, a big housing scheme with about 36,000 working class families. So my brother goes to the headmaster of the primary school and says, "I would like to play the violin." To which the headmaster replied, "We don't do music at this school because it takes us all the time to teach these poor kids the basics." So my brother goes back to my mother, who had recently joined the mothers group, and he tells her he can't learn to play the violin. So my mother goes to the mothers group, and over a period of time, they come back to the headmaster, and instead of shouting him and complaining, they did a really revolutionary thing. They said to the headmaster, "We want to show you how talented our children are, and we want to put on a festival." To which the headmaster replied, "That's a great idea, I will help you." And my mother became the organising secretary of this festival. And the festival grew and grew and grew very quickly till 1969, when 18,000 people in Craigmillar all were part of this festival, where they were all really helping their children get a better life. But they also, all the adults came with their creative skills as well. So in the early 1970s, what became known as the Craigmillar Festival Society attracted attention from all over the world, came to Craigmillar to see the so-called miracle as this festival kept growing and growing. And my mother was at the centre of this, and I was at her side. But of course, as a young boy, I was completely unaware of what was actually happening. In the 1970s, they got some money from the EEC, the European Economic Community, and they set about creating a vision to reimagine their society. And they called it the Comprehensive Plan for Action. And they commissioned a notorious criminal called Jimmy Boyle, who was in a prison called Barlinnie, to design a sculpture that symbolized how can you change this community. We'll create a sculpture called the Gentle Giant that will Gulliver, that will care and share. And that's what you see here, is the front cover of this, what became a revolutionary and innovative planning document. So I was brought up with this. All these pioneering events, all these people were coming from all over the world to Craigmillar, a lot from the States. And there was this big thing in the 70s, the community arts movement. So there was lots of murals getting, particularly in America, in the USA, were getting produced. There was all this community action. And the Craigmillar Festival Society and my mother were part of this. But of course, as I was the son, I wasn't really interested in what my mother was doing. She was my mum. So I get to about 17, 18, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I wasn't particularly good at anything at school. The only thing I could do was draw and paint. And so I ended up going to civil service. I didn't really like it. Then eventually I ended up going to art college because that's the only thing I could do, was draw and paint. And then I really found my feet. And then I became an illustrator. I went to London. I worked for magazines and various things, and I became a muralist. And I produced about 80 really large-scale murals, like that were often like 140, 300 feet long. And through that process, I really began to go back to what I was as my childhood and realized that my mother was right. That if you involve people in creating art, you create something which can be really profound and can change things, and it can definitely transform lives. And one of these projects was for Greenpeace, and to create a banner which you fitted into a suitcase, and we travel around the world collecting stories in the mid-1995 for what I called the World Solutions Banner to tackle climate change. And one of the places we came to was Mexico. And this is the finished artwork. And the central section you see is painted by an amazing Mexican artist called Patricia Cunano, who was married to Arnold Belkin, an Mexican muralist from the 70s. And so that was my first encounter with Mexico, because I really wanted to come to Mexico because I'd learned about Rivera, Frida Kahlo, Mexican muralists, and it was such a privilege to be in front of these murals in Mexico City. So it was like, when I came here, I just loved that whole thing about what the Mexican murals were all about. It was inspiring. But then, so I did about 80 murals, but then, to cut a long story short, I got married, we moved back to Edinburgh, and I ended up designing these tapestries, which are very similar to the murals. And I did the first, it was the Battle of Prestonpans tapestries, where we live, in Kilkenzie, East Lothian, in Scotland. And then I did the Great Tapestry of Scotland, which became involved over 1,000 stitchers telling the story of Scotland. And when it was launched in 2013, we had no idea of the interest it would generate. But we opened it at the Scottish Parliament, and the next day, 5,000 people turned up, and that went on for 3 weeks. And it was so amazing that actually what happened was it was the beginnings of having, it's now got a permanent home in Galashiels in Scotland, attracting tourists from all over the world and people from Scotland and England to marvel at not just the story of Scotland, but essentially the creativity of all these stitchers, which are mainly women. And I cannot emphasize enough the creativity of these women. And they bring such love, attention to detail, and the way they work together is truly extraordinary. Although I'm the designer of these tapestries, I've done about 20 of these tapestries now, it is essentially about when you see a large scale artwork, hand-stitched by thousands upon thousands of beautiful bits of stitching, and all of it containing personal stories of these stitchers, it's really moving, it's really profound. So, and this is if you go into the building, it's 180, what you'll see is 160 panels, 1 meter, each panel is 1 meter square, so it's a big artwork, and everybody goes there and thinks, oh, I'll do the Great Tapestry of Scotland today, but they'll never get through it because there's just so much information in it. It's so overpowering. In 2017, I got diagnosed with throat cancer, and that's why I have to drink quite a lot of water because I don't have enough saliva. And as I was getting treatment, I was in the hospital getting sort of pumped full of chemo. I got a phone call from this doctor from Dundee in the Nine Wells, an ENT surgeon, a South African called Rod Mountain. And he says to me, while I'm lying in bed getting pumped full of these really sort of horrendous chemicals, he says, when you get better, you can do the cancer tapestry. And I thought, my God, this guy thinks I'm going to live. And if you've ever had chemo, but if you ever had chemo and you get pumped in, eventually you've got no energy at all. So, but that evening, I still had time to think, and I thought, well, that's a really good idea. And then the next day, my oncologist, Dr. Anna Nixon, saw me drawing in the hospital, and she came back at the end of her surgery, and she showed me her drawings. And so I had met two wonderful doctors who were what they wanted to show and what they were interested in was to show the human side of cancer treatment. And so when I did get better, we started the cancer tapestry journey. So these are my drawings, and that was drawings. And then when I got back to my studio, I started to do paintings of my experience. And this panel here which has now been stitched by my wife as part of the cancer tapestry. It's my story, my family story. It hopefully just shows you the sort of the confusion, my experience of getting tapestry, or when you're bombarded with all this information, what we've been told what's going to happen to you and what's wrong with you, etc., etc. The whole thing, again, getting cancer treatment is overpowering. And hopefully I caught that in this painting. But then we started to stitch these panels. So we launched the first series of them last year. So we've got 6 finished panels. And our aim is to show 1,000 stories of cancer treatment and what that means. And so each of those little circles all the way around it, each one contains a story of a different person. Some of them have passed away because of cancer. A lot of them have survived cancer. Some of them are living with cancer. And so hopefully it begins to tell the story of what it means to have cancer. And also to show the science behind cancer treatment. Because what I was amazed at was the doctors, the nurses, all the staff you meet in these hospitals are amazing. How they do what they do and look after you, I couldn't do it. It was just amazing. And in the hair of the figure there, Heather Swinson, who stitched most of that panel, she stitched in all the initials of all the people who put a stitch into that panel, and that's about 150 people. So I thought it was that's a good example of how these panels work. So that's the first beginnings of the panels there, and the reason why I am here is that we've got now the first Mexican cancer tapestry. And I just want to say, I've seen it, it's outside, it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's beyond gorgeousness. And I know that some of the stitchers are here today and people have helped. Can we all just give them a round of applause?